Hello, this is Forest of Oak, Lesson 11, Magical Tools and Altars. What tools does a witch use? Well, to be honest, a kitchen witch will tend to use whatever is at hand. A finger, stones, an old cooking pot, a wooden spoon, feathers, you get the idea. A full Wiccan ceremonial witch will use beautifully made and crafted athames, chalices, and wands, all consecrated and dedicated, and only ever used in magic and ritual. Others will use a combination ranging between these two examples. It's a personal choice. It really is up to you and your budget, what you want to use. Altar, a place where you keep your tools and equipment, an area on which you work spells, a place where you put offerings to deity, a place to keep special sacred items. It is also a good place to meditate in front of if you have the space. The dictionary definition of an altar is a table or flat-topped block used as the focus for a religious ritual, especially for making sacrifices or offerings to a deity. Which pretty much sums it up, although let's assume the sacrifices bit is symbolic rather than young virgins left for the local dragon. Your altar can be nothing more than a mantelpiece with a candle and a crystal on, good for those that are not out of the broom closet, up to a full-on, dedicated, ornate tables dripping in paraphernalia, and of course every design in between. Traditionally, an altar is in the north or east, but again go with what works for you. Sometimes you don't have the space to put it anywhere but in the west. Seriously, you won't be struck down by the gods. Some witches have one altar, some have many. You could have a main altar, a working altar, separate altars for each of the elements, altars dedicated to particular deities, and altars specifically for intents such as prosperity and healing. The options are really limitless. If you are limited for space, go with a windowsill or a shelf, top of a bookcase, inside a cupboard, or even a tray that you can keep hidden if needed and bring out when you want to work with it. If you have an outside space, then you can even put an altar there. A large flat stone works well, or you could even use a window box. Cupboards work well too. Use the shelves inside to put your items on, then you can close the doors when you are finished and no one knows what's inside. Your altar isn't just a place to keep all your magical items, it is also a place to honour deity. Over time and use, it also becomes a very sacred space, collecting all the magical energies that happen on and around it. It is a focal point, a trigger that reminds you who you and what you are. I also like to decorate my altar with seasonal items. How you set up your altar is really up to you and what feels right. But traditionally, the goddess items are placed on the left and the god items on the right. The altar is a reflection of a ritual circle, so if you use representations of the elements, then they should technically be placed to correspond with the right directions too. If you belong to a particular tradition or coven, they may have strict rules about these things. If you are unsure, ask. They may have underlying concepts of why they do things a particular way. However, I don't believe the traditional rules are hard and fast. Nothing is wrong if you think an item feels right in a particular place. Go for it. I'm a firm believer in if it feels right for you, do it, school of thought. An altar doesn't have to be big either, and it doesn't have to be fancy. Just a vase of flowers on a windowsill is good enough to be a focal point for your altar. I also like to use my altar to pop spell workings on that are processing, and it gives me a focal point for meditation or prayers each day. but what you use your altar for is totally up to you. A lot of altars will have traditional tools such as athames, wands, and chalices, with perhaps statues or representations of deity on as well. But for the Into the Wild switch, anything goes, and I do find mine is far more informal and definitely leans towards nature in a big way. My main altar always has a vase of flowers, herbs, or greenery from the garden, along with pebbles and shells I've collected from the beach, and depending on the time of year, it might have leaves, seeds, and berries as well, usually centered around a candle or an offering dish. I also believe an altar is fluid and can change weekly, monthly, sometimes daily, depending on what you find or are gifted to put on it. Don't stick to any rules. It is your altar. Work with it and see what you create. If it feels right, put it on there. If it doesn't, then don't. Altar cloth. This is used to cover the altar, of course. You can keep the same one, or you can change the colours and patterns to correspond with the seasons. Athame. This is a ceremonial knife, usually black handled with a double knife edge, although it's not usually sharp. It's used for casting circles, invoking, and banishing. There are some beautiful athames on the market, but you could also use a plain knife. If you get hold of one with a wooden handle, you can paint symbols on it to personalise it. If you don't want to purchase or use an athame, you can just use your finger. The athame is a representation of the god of masculine energy. It can be aligned with fire or air. An asperger. This is usually made from twigs tied together to form a small brush shape, and it's used to sprinkle water around the circle in ritual or before performing magic. This can also be made from feathers or something like lavender heads tied together. Bell. This can be used in ritual to welcome in quarters or deities and can also be used in trance and meditation. It can also be rung to clear away negative energies. Besom. This is the name of the witch's broomstick. It is a symbol of purification, used to sweep away negative energies and used at hand fastings to jump over for fertility. A besom can also be placed in a ritual circle to create a doorway. If you are in a group and everyone has a besom, you can also place them end to end to create the circle. If you've seen the film Practical Magic, you will note that they do this to form a circle in the film. Bowline. This is a working knife, usually with a white handle and used for cutting herbs and carving symbols into candles. Sometimes a bowline is crescent shaped like a small sickle. If you don't want to purchase one, then just use a vegetable knife. Cauldron. A pot used for burning spells, herbs, and other items, sometimes filled with water for scrying. Whatever you use for a cauldron, and it can be a cast iron three-legged cauldron, an old casserole dish, an old Dutch oven, or an old copper pot. It does need to be fireproof. You can also use it to burn offerings, to burn spells, to brew potions, and to burn incense. The cauldron could be used to represent the feminine or spirit. A censer. This is a vessel that is used to burn incense. If you think Roman Catholic priests swinging a brass pot around on a chain, the censer aligns with the element of air. You could also use an incense burner, a brazier, or just a stick or cone incense holder. Cords. These are used in initiations, not magic, and occasionally to mark the boundary of the circle. Candles. An altar usually has two main candles to represent the god and goddess, although deity can also be represented on an altar by pictures or statues. Candles can also be used to represent the element of fire. Chalice. A representation of the goddess, it can be an ornate silver wine glass, a pretty crystal glass, wood, bone, or just a simple beaker. The chalice is aligned with the element of water. Chocolate. Aha, did I just drop that one in to see if you were listening? Nope. After a ritual, you may feel lightheaded and need to ground. Chocolate is an excellent way to ground your body and bring it back to the here and now. Crystals. Although not technically classed as a magical tool, crystals are used a lot in witchcraft to meditate with, to heal with, for offerings in divination and spell work. Crystals cover everything from beach pebbles to expensive minerals. They align with the element of earth. Tall, pointed crystals can also be used to represent the god. Crystal ball. Used in divination, can also be used as representation of the goddess. This doesn't need to be huge either. I have a couple of small crystal balls that are only a couple of inches across, and they sit nicely in the palm of my hand. Deity symbols. An altar often has candles to represent the god and the goddess, as mentioned, but you can also have statues and symbols to represent them too. You can use candles, you can use beautiful statues, and you can also use crystals. I have 2 pebbles from the beach on one of my altars that I painted symbols on to represent the god and the goddess. You could even use a twig for the god and a pretty pebble for the goddess. The options are limitless. Drum. This is used in ritual to raise energy and also for meditation and trance work. It doesn't have to be a fancy schmancy hand-painted bodhran either. It can be a biscuit tin. Incense. Loose can be burnt on charcoal, stick, or you can have cone on a burner, used to clear negative energy, create sacred space, create the mood for meditation, or to add energy to ritual and spell work. Incense aligns with the element of air. If you can't use incense for health or safety reasons, you can use essential oil in a burner, scented candles, or even a spritz made from distilled water and a few drops of essential oil. Offering dish or libation bowl. Usually on an altar, but sometimes placed in sacred spots or in the garden to leave offerings for deity and or the fae. I have one dish I made for myself from air drying clay. I have another pretty silver one that came from a charity thrift store, and I also have one that is simply a large flat shell. Traditionally, offerings are water or wine, but you can also use herbs, natural items, crystals and stones. In fact, whatever you wish to. I've even known people leave offerings of chocolate. A mortar and a pestle, or pestle and mortar, whichever way you want to say it, used to grind herbs and powders. This is useful if you make your own incense or magic powders. If you don't want to purchase a special mortar and pestle, you can use a solid bowl and the end of a rolling pin. Parchment. This is used for writing spells on. You can buy some very nice parchment in the craft shops, and the pound dollar stores also sometimes stock it. You can also make your own fairly easily, but you can just use regular copier paper. Just make sure to cleanse the paper before you use it. If you want to add a bit of oomph to the intent, put a couple of drops of the corresponding essential oil on your paper after you've written the spell. Pentagram. Usually an altar will have some representation of a pentagram, sometimes flat on a stone, sometimes made from carved wood. You can buy some beautiful altar pentagrams, but you can also easily make one from twigs tied together with string or paint one on a large flat pebble. Salt. Sometimes used to represent the element of earth on an altar or mixed with water to make cleansing and purifying water. It can also be sprinkled around the circle for protection. Sword. Used to cast a circle, usually only in a group of people holding a ritual outside, as it's a bit big and unwieldy for a solitary. Staff. Used to direct energy, sometimes to cast circles, used more often by druids than witches. If the staff is forked at the top, it is referred to as a stang and can be used as a representation of the god. Wand, usually made from wood, used for casting circles, invoking, banishing, and directing energy. It can be aligned with the element of fire or air. You can buy lovely ones from stores and online, but they are also seriously easy to make. Start with a twig from a tree. I prefer to pick up those that the wind has blown down, but if there aren't any, please ask the tree first if you can take part of it. Make sure you only take what you need and cut it properly, then thank and leave an offering for the tree. This can then be sanded down smooth, left natural, varnished, or decorated with symbols, ribbons, crystals, feathers, whatever you can come up with. Cleansing and consecrating your tools. We cleanse and consecrate our magical tools to clear them of any negative energy that might be residing in them from previous owners, from the store that they came from, or just the surrounding air. We consecrate them to ready them for magical work and to imbue them with our own energies and intent. You don't want to use a magical tool that carries negative energies or unknown energies within it, as that will affect your working. I'm not talking about popping on your rubber gloves and washing up here, although in the case of pebbles from the beach and the like, it can be advisable. I'm talking about spiritual cleansing. There are several ways to cleanse a magical item, and it will depend on what you have to hand and what the actual tool is made from. Incense. You can pass an item through incense smoke to purify it. It's preferable to use a specific purifying scent such as sage, lavender, or rosemary, but go with what feels right for you. Breath. You can also breathe on your tool, ground and center yourself first, and then really focus your breath on cleansing and purifying the item. Weather. You can leave your tools outside, preferably on a windy day, and let the air do the job for you. Flame. You can pass items over the flame of a candle, but be very careful and make sure that the item will not be damaged. You will need some visualization skills for this one to visualize the flame getting larger and enveloping the item to cleanse it. Sunshine and moonlight. You can also leave the item out in the sun or under the moon. Allow the sunshine or moonlight to cleanse and purify it. Water. You can wash the item in running water, under the tap, or in a stream. You can also place the item in a bowl of water that has had a pinch of salt or a couple of drops of cleansing essential oil added to it. If you prefer, you could use cooled herbal tea as the wash for your item. If the item is particularly delicate, you can just sprinkle a few drops of salt water on it. Burying. If the item is durable, you can bury it either in the soil or in salt for a few hours or days. The salt or the soil will absorb any negative energy, and don't forget where you buried them. Visualization. The easiest way, although I think, is to use your inner spirit. Take the object in your hands, call upon deity, and visualize a cleansing and purifying white light coming through your hands and into the object, flushing out any negative energies from it and filling it with pure, clean energy. Once you've cleansed your magical tools, you can bless or consecrate them. Different words, same meaning. You can consecrate an item by using the visualization method mentioned above, sending the bright white light into the item and asking the goddess and the god to bless it for magical work. You can also say a blessing chant. Homework. 1. After reading all about the magical tools, are there any that you are particularly drawn to? And why are you drawn to them? 2. Do you feel you will or do not need tools to make magic work for you? Explain in detail if so, and if not, why not? 3. If you were working a spell and needed an object to represent a person, what items could you use other than the actual person or a photograph? 4. If you didn't have any tools with you but were required to perform a ritual, what items could you use to represent the 4 elements? Give as many examples for each as you can. 5. Do you have an altar set up? If you do, please describe what you have on it and why. If you don't have an altar, please describe what you would put on it if you could. 6. How would you consecrate one of your magical items? 7. If you were cleansing a crystal, what method would you use? 8. If you were cleansing a chalice, what method would you use? Do some research. What scents, incenses, or oils could be used for cleansing and consecrating magical tools? 10. Before leaving the house to go about your day, send out an intention for you to be gifted with an item with which to create an altar around. You may find a feather in an unusual place. 11. A pebble or fallen leaf might catch your eye on a walk, or you may be given an unexpected gift by a friend. What were you gifted, and what does it mean to you right now? 12. Create an altar around your gifted item or items. It can be elaborate or as simple as you would like. And last, number 13, take a photo of your altar and share it with us. Homework for each lesson should be emailed to your mentor, myself, Ness, or Heather, support@kitchenwitchhearth.net. And for further study, Rachel has a YouTube link on the lesson PDF on the Magical Tools and Altars playlist.